And talk about that war on corruption, that two-day conference, anti-corruption conference. Let's listen into some of the things, some of the powerful soundbites that came from that conference, from the president to the DPP, DCI, the Attorney General, as well as the director or the CEO of the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission. Listen.
Some of the frustrations which really pull us down is some of the strange orders that we receive. Other than even starting the investigation, we are stopped even before we record a statement from somebody who you know very well has stolen from Kenyans. And even we receive some of those orders, like another one which I received just the other day. Do not use the door to go and arrest Mr. Hay. And then I said, no, through my information, there is a window. If I cannot use the door to go and take Mr. Hay, then I'm going to use the window.
Judgments of the courts that allow for the return to office of persons charged with corruption.
I have been fighting to ask those people that we have charged to step aside. They must step aside. And that is in the Constitution, and it's a right that we have to ask. We are not pleading.
The first troops in the war against corruption. And we need your support.
And the moment we say collectively, we are going to fight this war together, I can for sure tell you, this country is beautiful, it has plenty for each and every one of us.
Some are here hiring professional bloggers to demonize anybody or to demonize the judiciary. Like today, you must have seen in the media, I'm shown they are naked massaging people who are supposed to be corrupt.
We did, for example, as we have now been fighting this issue of money laundering, and we put in a clause that we wanted lawyers who hold clients' accounts to be able to share that information with investigative and financial bodies. And they shut it down in Parliament. So today, under client privilege, people can move money around and not have to declare and just say, client, munaita nini hiyo? Client confidentiality, hiyo.
All right, those are some of sound bites that came from that two-day anti-corruption conference. Bwana Wakili, let me begin with you. Some of the things that came to the fore, pronouncements by the DCI and the Director of Criminal of Public Prosecutions, Nordin Haji, are complaining about the judiciary being one of the stumbling blocks in the war against corruption, saying that some unexplainable court orders and lenient bail terms, impede them from carrying out their work. What is your take on that?
Ben, this is the danger of people passing a constitution because their national leaders had read the constitution on their behalf. It must be told to the DPP and in equal and certain terms that the constitution affords each Kenyan certain rights which are not derogable and it is not even given to the Kenyans by the government. You are born with them. Right. Those inherent rights demand, and the constitution demands that they be respected, notwithstanding which fight we are fighting. The other thing that we must remind the DPP is that the DPP is just a single litigant. He cannot demand that the Chief Justice or the Judiciary acts in a certain manner so that he can achieve whatever he wills to do. And in the war against corruption, if I were to be honest with you, I think and I believe that the weakest link is the DPP.
But he's giving his grievances. You're saying he's just another litigant, but he's a director of public prosecutions, and he says this slows down the wheels of justice.
While it slows down the wheels of justice, but look at it this way, what the DPP does, and at times you wonder, who advises the DPP? You get to a procurement department, you arrest 50 people. Who will be the witnesses? Ask yourself, there is what we call in law, the people bearing the biggest responsibility. Go for the people bearing the biggest responsibility, and then after that, you can work backwards to deal with these people. The other thing is this, you cannot charge a clerk in a company and a CEO in the same charge. It is just basic criminal knowledge 101. And all these are things that compound to his problems. Look at what is happening to the NYS case, NYS2. We said here in this table that case had to be relooked for it to be prosecutable.
Right.
But going forward, the conference was good. That one we must agree. But there are things that came out of that conference that need to be relooked into. I appreciate what the president talked about the Ndegwa report. When you say you want to delink civil servants from business, that is a huge task. It is easy to say. Look at it this way today, Ben. You are rearing chicken in your village and you are selling those chickens to a government parastatal. Is that amounting to business? I have cows in my village and I'm selling milk to KCC. Am I doing business with government? I have a small shamba, I'm planting maize and I'm selling maize to NCPB. How will you treat those kind of relations? But I'm hoping Parliament will discuss these issues in length as the Ndegwa report comes back to Parliament. The other person who must going forward help government and help us in this fight. Each person in the fight of corruption, all of us as Kenyans, we want to live in a corrupt-free country, but we must live in a corrupt-free country which is entrenched within the four corners of the law.
All right. Hesbon, what stood out for you in this conference?
I think the biggest thing that stood out is our, basically our criminal justice system as far as corruption is concerned. And, my friend here wants to disagree, but it's a bit clear that there is a problem with the judiciary and, of course, another problem with our DPP, his office generally. Those are two critical things that came out. And from just my little legal knowledge, I mean, a case in court is won based on the adduced evidence and litigation in a court of law. So where there is a gap as far as evidence is concerned, I mean, that is the work of the DPP. Why are you taking people to court if you don't have sufficient evidence? But then, where does the judiciary come in? Why are we having situations where people are charged in other jurisdictions? Like Mark has always said, yet here in Kenya, there is nothing substantive that you get from our courts of law. Either those cases are prolonged, or you don't even get to hear of the charge sheet, you don't even know what is happening. So there is that clarity. And I think because these are all agencies fighting the same thing, and I think Kenyans are behind the fight against corruption 100%, because there is a way in which we've since realized that the reason why everything is just difficult for any average Kenyan is because of high-end corruption in top places that has been institutionalized. So there is that goodwill that Kenyans have given all the agencies fighting corruption. And I don't see any problem in the office of the DPP, the Judiciary, the office of the Chief Justice, the DCI, coming together and just ironing out issues so that there is a clear-cut process that makes litigation as far as corruption is concerned seamless. Where somebody has been charged in a court of law and there is sufficient evidence to show that this person is guilty, they need to be charged. There is sufficient evidence to show that this person is not guilty. That needs to be clear to all Kenyans so that we don't treat corruption as something that is amorphous, where every other person who perceives, an element of corruption in their life start fighting back even before they are charged.
Okay. Mark, what is your take in this debate about the DPP and DCI complaining that the judiciary shortchanges them? But there's another school of thought that challenges them, telling them there's no point to arresting somebody, a corruption suspect, than wanting to hold him as you look for evidence.
First, let's be clear. And I'd like to remove certain elements that confuse the general public from the conversation first, so we can have a proper, clear conversation. First, we must remove the legalism.
Correct.
There's rule of law, rule by law, or the Constitution says that the DPP can't talk to the judiciary, or the judiciary is only supposed... Let's first remove that and ask ourselves a few questions. And what are the facts? Fact number one, is there corruption in this country? Yes, there is. Fact number two, does every Kenyan want the corrupt to go to jail? Yes, we do. Fact number three, is the DPP, judiciary, and all other institutions failing in delivering this? Yes, they are. Therefore, it becomes irrelevant for you to tell us as the Chief Justice that the thing that makes you angry is pictures of you massaging suspects. That's not the issue. The issue is that we live in a country where the Akashas in the United States, where they're now guilty and they were innocent in your courts, they're now guilty and they're saying the reason why they were innocent in your courts is not about the lack of evidence, but the amount of money that was made available to judicial officers to divert the course of the law. So the Chief Justice should be telling us how many corrupt judges is he harboring in the name of rule of law. As number two, he should also be telling us how is it that this thing called client privilege is a conduit by which that lawyers become insulated from their criminal activities. It is just basic questions. Those are the questions we must answer. Number three, you must tell us why is it that you want to unfreeze accounts simply because someone applied. You must tell us also why are bail times so easy. You must tell us also why these cases take forever and a day. You must tell us. You see, at the end of the day, you cannot tell us, listen, I keep my house very clean, but you will never eat because the supplier
Kipchumba said
supplies
you passed
food.
the constitution yourselves.
No, listen, this is the thing. We must understand that that constitution also recognizes that the people of Kenya are sovereign. I am a sovereign in this country. That means that constitution is subject to me. I voted for it. It means I can change it. So if the Maraga wants us to go for a constitutional referendum so he can do his job, so be it. The fact of the matter is this. You can tell us all the legalese and all the excuses that lawyers throughout the world use to hide facts. But the truth is Kenyans deserve and want justice, however that may be. In fact, to use a lawyer's term, let justice be done though the heavens fall. That is the term they use. Finally, in conclusion, in the United States of America, how many people in this Trump-Russia investigation have been detained and the prosecution has said they're looking for evidence? Part of the reason you want to detain this guy is so that you detain them so that their offices somewhere in a commission are not raided and servers are stolen. We've seen these things. It's in the news. You release someone today, tomorrow servers are stolen. You release another person today, witnesses disappear. So you tell me this rule of law that you want, is it rule of thugs or rule of law? Because if the law was ruling, thugs would not be hiding behind having 30, 40 people coming to defend you just because you're a lawyer or a judge like them.
I'll come to you, Wakili, in a short while, but Dismas, let me get your thoughts.
Well, you know, that conference was largely stale, and it was dead on energy. There was nothing coming out till President Kenyatta, Speaker Lusaka, and Raila Odinga spoke. And when Uhuru spoke, he spoke eloquently about the conflict of interest and unintended consequences of the Ndegwa report that Kipchumba Karuri decided to give a one-view perspective. What President Kenyatta meant to say, and I'm not speaking on his behalf, but I understand him when he speaks, that when you are the engineer running a department at the Ministry of Roads, you cannot be a road contractor at the same time. So that you design a tender and then you award yourself. And that's even what Burude Nabuera, who was in the National Assembly during the Kenyatta's administration, has indicated in black and white. So public servants need to take a decision. Are you going to, if you want to make money, you go to the private sector. But if you want to serve the nation, then join the public sector. Because we don't want to have this incest. There's a lot of incest taking place. So people must take a decision. And when President Kenyatta says to his Attorney General that I want this piece of legislation, we should give him a pat on the back. And it's very heartening that the majority leader, Adan Duale, has indicated that he has already had a conversation with the AG that such kind of legislation is coming up in the next 3 weeks. So that people take a decision in the most advanced economy in the world, Germany. If you want to make money, you go to the private sector. If you want to serve the nation and then when you retire, we write good epitaphs about you, you go to the public service. So when you wake up in the morning, you know that you are going to serve Mora. You're not going to serve Mora for 10 minutes and you start making contracts. Then the second thing, it was about Lusaka. And Lusaka has been a governor. And the biggest challenge you have in the county governments is MCAs who are elected maybe because he's a welder or he's a tout. And when they go to the county assembly, they do not understand those numbers. And we must applaud Lusaka for saying that we need to train these MCAs upon election. They go to the Kenyan School of Government, then they understand the basics of financial management and governance, so that they can look at somebody in the eye. And then Raila Odinga, Raila Odinga gave an example which we should emulate, about the example in Malaysia. That at the end of the day, when you go to the Minister for Roads, he's got a big house, 10%. But in Africa, it's 100% of the budget which goes to put up a house. But the biggest disaster in that conference is when you have these agencies with a common enemy called corruption, and you know they're drying their dirty linen in public. For Morai in Kisii does not want to see those verbal attacks. You know, Maraga saying this, and then Muturi saying this, President Kenyatta saying this. You know, you've been given responsibility. Please go deliver. And in my view, there's a unique opportunity now for President Kenyatta, having delegated a lot of the responsibilities to Matiang'i, now to bring together all these agencies, bring Maraga, Kinoti, Haji in one room, because we have one common enemy. If Haji can benefit from the advice of Maraga, that when you're putting up a charge sheet, just have one suspect so that you have 2 lawyers. Instead of having a charge sheet from here to Kisii with 100 suspects, and then you've got 100 lawyers, and then you do not know how to proceed with this. And at this, we must also congratulate Musalia Mudavadi, because he's taken a position on this. In fact, he's requested the president that create an environment, because again, the president cannot summon these agencies, but create an environment for these guys to sit. Because if that one doesn't happen, then the corruption architects, you know, they're dancing or smiling all the way to the bank. And believe you me, the corruption architects, some of them who are at Bomas of Kenya, and others who are watching the proceedings live, who are very excited. Because when Maraga is driving this direction, then Haji in another direction, Kinoti in another direction, Raila in another direction, and then Raila sits on the DP seat. I don't know, you know, a breach of protocol. So, you know, now we are just jumping all over like popcorn, you know, flying somewhere. The architects of corruption were very happy. So President Kenyatta must cause a meeting to happen. And have these people, you know,
we've seen these corruption conferences, and there's always some type of blame game. Wakili, let me come to you on the issue of the DPP and the DCI, because that is where the buck stops, with the CJ telling them, bring to court cases you can prosecute. And all these things coming to the fore. What do you say to what Mark had to say?
Then actually looking at the whole thing, where the easiest job lies, if you asked me today, is at the DPP. Because the work of the DPP, when EACC brings files, your work is to evaluate the evidence on record and to just advise whether this case you have sufficient evidence to sustain the case. And the other thing then which we must address is that the threshold for a criminal case is so high so that any mediocre evidence cannot sustain it. The threshold is beyond reasonable doubt. If we have to amend our laws so that we want to charge all the corrupt people, then that is where we need to begin. We need to change the beyond reasonable doubt to the balance of probabilities, which is application in the civil cases. The other thing that also going forward we must tell Kenyans is that not all wrongs are crimes. All crimes are wrongs, but not all wrongs are crimes. It must be known that...
Wakili, is that where the problem is? Because there's some people who think that the problem is
actually, I'm coming to where the problem is
lawyers.
Let me address it.
That lawyers always negotiate with judges and magistrates to get their own hearing dates and terms, and because the law firms want to handle more than one case, and
I'm coming to that, Ben. We must, if we are to win the war on corruption, everybody must take the part of the bitter truth and solve it from their maybe professional angle or departmental level. Look at it this way. We need to start from lawyers. If you are saying a lawyer should just handle one brief, or if you are a lawyer, you have 10 briefs, you should assign enough advocates to handle with. For example, I am handling a brief where we have 27 charged people and the DPP has listed 74 witnesses. If you are to be very honest to ourselves, when will this suit come to an end, and when will Kenyans realize whatever was lost? That is an example. The other example is this. Even no matter how much we fight Maraga in his own, there are things he can't cause to happen, because he cannot influence an independent judge from making a decision. Those are now institutional issues which we need to handle. The other thing is this. When you look at the budget of the DPP and the DCI, it is around double the budget we give to the judiciary. How do we expect the judiciary to operate? When you go to the judiciary, you see there is no bulb in that court. The court will not be able to sit up to the around 4. When you go to this other court, you are told there are no papers. So those small administrational issues, you will find one one matter has 10 mentioned dates. Mention what? Mention to confirm some very small things, whether so and so has filed what and where. These are the things I support Dismas by saying the president must now empty his desk, take time to help Kenyans fight corruption. Corruption is... It is corruption, that's why we cannot attain 100% transition to secondary school, because people ate the money that was supposed to build schools somewhere.
Hesbon, corruption is a key agenda point in President Uhuru Kenyatta's last term. Is he heading the right direction?
Well, I think he's heading the right direction, but just like we've all said, from that conference, it's a bit clear that everyone is fighting the same thing, but through means that are actually colliding, you know. So there's a conversation that can only be instituted by the president to bring everyone on board in as far as the fight against corruption is concerned. But I think critically, I think blaming the judiciary overly without looking at the office of the DPP and DCI cannot solve this problem, because evidence is important. If they invest in evidence and stop running to court, I think we'll have a very efficient fight against corruption. But there are a few things that I think Mark has mentioned. One that has captured my imagination is the fact that lawyers are also keeping information. I mean, it's common knowledge. If I want to rob a bank and I go and tell a lawyer, next week I'll rob a bank and I want you to represent me after that, the lawyer will tell me, go ahead. But he will give that information if I declare it before. But after, I think the lawyers, through their professional code of conduct, cannot disclose information that are given to their clients if the client is coming to the lawyer after they've been arrested or arraigned in a court of law. So I don't think we can mix issues. We cannot blame lawyers. We need to blame our systems. If our systems are very efficient, then the lawyers who are unscrupulous will just come out.
All right. Mark, they say the law is, I don't want to use that word, but are we suffering from our own laws? Do you think this war can be won with our set of laws as we have?
First and foremost, let me explain something. That if you change your plumbing and you put golden pipes, but it's still connected to your toilet, the content will always be the same. It does not change. And that's what we keep trying to do in this country. We keep thinking that if we change our laws, we will change what comes out of it. The truth of the matter is we are administrating over a very corrupt and dirty and filthy system. Let's be very clear that if you read any corruption case, you'll understand that every person who was supposed to be a watchguard over that corruption failed in their duty. You find the institution was complacent in the acquisition of that land by another entity. You will find that the lawyers involved were told beforehand, okay, I want to go steal 2 million from NCPB. How do you advise I should steal it? Make sure you have this document and this document. They're complicit. You find that there are cases where in Nairobi County, a certain lawyer, I'll not say his name, he's got much more money than me, he could sue me to death. He goes, files a case against the county, and then he's both the filer of the case and the defender of the county and the beneficiary of the money. Now you tell me, what kind of incest, as Dismas would call it, is that? So the reality is, it's not a lack of law. Let me tell you something. One of my good legal friends always says that the law is not a replacement for common sense. Okay? So the common sense approach should be that we understand that if we want to change from beyond reasonable doubt to what do you call it, balance of probabilities, then let's do that. You understand? We are because the truth of the matter is this. The war against corruption is correctly named war. Okay? In any war, there are people who die from friendly fire. There are casualties. There are casualties of war, and there are people who are taken innocent. We must understand we are at war. So let's capture as many fish as we can. If we capture some innocent of MENA, we will rectify that later.
Enough said. We have to take a shot.
We remain a democracy and not a military junta.
Okay. Let's take a quick commercial break on that note. The war on corruption continues. When we come back on Sunday edition here on KTN News, we'll take a look at, we'll get into more politics. The ODM party has, after a decision by the NEC on Thursday, did expel 2 members of parliament, Msamboni's Suleiman Dori, as well as Malindi's Aisha Jumwa, the two being told they are free to challenge that decision. We'll take a look at that when we come back.
Your Excellency, let me tell you a story. And I was told when I was Minister for Roads and Public Works in my other early incarnation. This is a minister from Nigeria for roads and public works who went on a tour to Malaysia. There on invitation. So he was taken by his host, taken around the country, shown the highways that they have constructed in Malaysia. And then in the evening, he was treated to dinner at the residence of that minister. There, he found a nice mansion, a swimming pool, and nice sofa sets, and dinner sets. So at dinner, so he asked his host, "How did you manage this house?" The host took him to the balcony and showed him, "Look yonder. Do you see that highway there? Yes, 10% here." Two years later, it was the turn of the Malaysian to pay a return visit. When he went to Nigeria, he was taken around the roads. You saw roads were potholed, some of them untarmacked, and very poor condition, very poor state of affairs. In the evening, he was taken to dinner, and he found a palatial mansion, Olympic-sized swimming pool. The sofa sets were imported from Britain. Most of the chinaware were golden. So he asked his host, "How do you achieve all this?" He took him to the balcony. And so, "Do you see that highway there?" The Malaysian